You can't possibly tell the story of the Bible without also telling the stories of Jericho, Jerusalem, and Bethlehem, or those of Abraham, Moses, David, and of course Jesus. Nor can you tell the story of the New Testament, at least, without a look at Rome with its Caesars, generals, and puppet kings. Rome, powerful and decadent, cast its massive shadow over the entire New Testament from Matthew to Revelation. Join us today as we discuss the Roman Empire's impact on the story of the Bible. Welcome to the Shalom Y'all Ministries podcast. I'm your co-host, Adam Keim, along with my great and dear friend, Dr. Daniel McCabe. Daniel, it's been a little while since we've been able to do an episode together. How have you been lately?
Well, it's so good to be back with you. And, we had some time before the podcast to chat a little bit and catch that was probably the best time we've had in a long time. And now to be back together again, I think the viewers are really going to enjoy this topic, and it's going to be fun to have the interchange again.
Oh, I'm excited too. It's been too
Yeah.
long since we've done one together, but here we are.
Yeah.
And we here at Shalom Y'all truly believe that a walk through the land deepens your walk with the Lord. Our mission is to teach and encourage those who love the Bible, the land of the Bible, and the people of the land. There are a lot of current events happening in Israel these days, as is usually the case, but our hope is that you listeners can travel throughout the Holy Land with us someday. Please reach out for more information on how that can happen for you or your group when the time is right. And as we do typically when the both of us are here on a podcast episode, we will begin with a couple of mini topics before jumping into our main subject matter of the Roman Empire. So, Daniel, what do you have to lead off for us today?
Well, Adam, I'm not much of a cook. Maybe you are. I know you do some cooking around the house, don't you?
I do enjoy cooking. My wife is far superior than I am, of course, but yeah, I like to cook.
Do you do any baking?
I do. Yes. Quick story during COVID,
Okay.
when my wife had COVID and my oldest daughter had COVID, and I got, thankfully, at my job, gave me time away from work to take care of family members because that was going on. They were up in bed, and I'm just downstairs in the kitchen twiddling my thumbs. I'm like, what am I going to do all day, every day for the next 7 to 10 days? Oh, I'll bake something. And so every day I baked like 2 or 3 things, and I'm not a pro at all, but I just tried my hand on it, experimented. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I'm going somewhere with this, but let me look like I'm going to be going down a different path. I'm not. Did you know that there are only 3 commandments in Jewish law and tradition that are explicitly required of women? Only 3.
Hmm.
The first one that I'll mention is that every Friday night Sabbath meal, it's always usually the matriarch of the family that lights the candles for the meal. That's not a biblical command. It comes from rabbinic tradition, but every Friday night she lights the candles for the meal. That's one commandment. Then the second one, of course, this is a biblical one. You can read about it in Leviticus 12 or Leviticus 15, and it is a commandment for the woman to maintain proper menstrual purity, and that's the second. And then the third one is the one I really want to get to today that touches on the topic I've already reached here, and it's the third commandment is for them to give a dough offering when the women bake, a dough offering, Dough. And you can read about that in Numbers chapter 15, verses 17 through 21, and see a little peek of it in actual practice in Nehemiah 10:37. But the women are to give a dough offering when they bake.
Hmm.
Now, you may be familiar with the classic challah bread. Did you cook that for the family when you were down there
I
for a
did
while?
not bake any challah bread. No, I didn't.
Okay. I've never tried breaking challah bread. I was on a kick about 5, 6 years ago of doing a lot of bread making, and I've gotten out of that phase. I need to get back in it. I loved it so much because I love it. Just love bread, but I never made challah bread. But it's a staple, as you
Hmm.
know, in Jewish homes on the Sabbath and holidays. But before making challah bread, many Jewish women will fulfill this commandment that's called hafreshat challah.
Mm.
That means in Hebrew, the separation of challah.
Hmm.
Now, this commandment, it requires women when they're baking to set aside for the priests a small lump of kneaded dough. It's an action that's intended, I think, to invite blessing to their home and to thank God for his provisions. Certainly the latter is touched on in scripture. But in the absence of an active priesthood, of course, the women, how do they give their dough to the priest? Well, they can't, generally speaking, but instead of that, they're permitted to burn the separated dough or to throw it away in a double wrapped container, and in that way they can fulfill this commandment mentioned in Numbers 15. But they recite a blessing before they do it. Here's a blessing I found online. Obviously, I've never said that blessing or obviously participated in the dough offering, but there's one site online that includes a typical blessing that says this: May it be your will, eternal, our God, that the commandment of separating challah be considered as if I had performed it with all its details and ramifications. May my elevation of the challah be comparable to the sacrifice that was offered on the altar, which was acceptable and pleasing. Just as giving the challah to the priests in former times served to atone for sins, so may it atone for mine and make me like a person reborn without sins. May it
Hmm.
enable me to observe this holy day with my husband and our children and to become imbued with his holiness. May the spiritual influence of the command of Hala enable our children to be constantly sustained by the hands of the Holy One. Blessed is he with his abundant mercy, loving kindness, and love. Consider the command of Hala as if I have given the tithe, and just as I am fulfilling this command with all my heart, so may your compassion be aroused to keep me always from sorrow and pain. Amen. Whew, that's a long
Hmm.
prayer and blessing. If I had to pray that every time I ate bread or before I can eat, I don't know
Bread
how
would
well
go
I'd
stale,
do at
though, man.
that.
Yeah.
But of course, the dough offering is so short of atoning for sins. It's only the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. But some
Hmm.
women, they they perform this commandment again. It's called hafreshat challah. I don't know if I say that very well. Obviously, I don't have the proper Jewish intonation of that. But some women carry a large pot of dough. I don't know if you've ever seen this before, Adam, but they'll carry a large pot of dough inside the women's section at the Western Wall in Jerusalem, and they'll knead it there.
Huh.
And they'll separate a piece of the dough, lift it up, and pray for their family, loved ones, and a specific need, perhaps for themselves or for others. Last year, one woman I read in the news decided to visit the wall every Thursday night to fulfill Hafar Shahala, publicly reciting the names of the Israeli hostages that were taken by Hamas on October 7th, 2023. It's very moving.
Hmm.
And then another woman that I witnessed in an online video approached one of the ladies performing Hafar Shahala and requested prayer for a husband in a very touching display of unity between two strangers. So it's an offering that I didn't really know was still active today, but there it is, and I found it fascinating.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, what you got?
Well, I have something that I'm going to try to keep a mini topic.
Okay.
And I'm really going to restrain myself because this is a subject matter that I could talk about forever and it would be a whole
I hear you.
episode. And I know I don't have a lot of time today anyway. But we're going to talk about the Roman Empire in today's episode. So we will be talking a lot about stuff that has happened in the past. But for my mini topic, I'm going to talk about the Roman Empire of the future.
Ah,
Now, listeners may have heard us mention maybe a couple times here and there about a revived Roman Empire whenever we're talking about the latter days or the end times. And the reason why we see a future for the Roman Empire is not because there's a Bible verse that it says explicitly, the Roman Empire will come back. You're not going to find a verse that says that. However, there is biblical content that gives heavy implication to that. And in fact, it's found in the book of Daniel. There's 3 different places in the book of Daniel that he has a lot actually to say about the future the Roman Empire that would come in the future from Daniel's day, as God has given him visions of successive empires that would come after Nebuchadnezzar's day. And the first one is in Daniel 2, 40 to 45. I won't read all these verses for you. I'll just highlight where it seems to heavily imply that the Roman Empire would come after Daniel's day, but then also still be around in some form or fashion in the end days. So in Daniel 2, in Nebuchadnezzar's famous dream of the statue that he had, he was the head of gold, and then the Persian Empire would be the chest of silver, and then the Greeks would be the thighs of bronze, and then the statue had feet of iron mixed with clay. And Daniel's interpretation said, well, that means that kingdom, that empire, shall be partly strong and partly brittle. And if you kind of work carefully through this vision, it's clear and it's obvious that we have Babylon, Persia, Greece, and then Rome. And then here you have this scary, powerful empire of Rome. And in verse 44 of that vision, it says, and in the days of those kings, these 10 toes, right, these 10 kings of the Roman Empire of some sort, in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. And it is talking about the physical revived kingdom of Israel. It shall break in pieces, that is the kingdom of God, will break in pieces all these kingdoms, that really is all the kingdoms of the world, and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. So some sort of kings of the Roman Empire in the days that God does set up the millennial kingdom, those kings of Rome will somehow be destroyed. So an interpreter, I think, reasonably looks at the Bible and says, well, then there must be some sort of version or remnants of the Roman Empire when that future day comes. So that's in Daniel 2. I'm going to jump down to Daniel 7. There's a vision of 4 beasts that also represent Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. And the 4th beast that represents Rome, in verse 24 of Daniel 7, it says, and for the 10 horns, this beast had 10 scary horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. And he shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings. And if we look in Roman history, it's like, well, this doesn't really match up with what we've seen in Roman history. So there must be yet unfulfilled future where this is happening. So this connects to the vision in chapter 2. We have these 10 kings, but now there's a little one that rises up after them. This little one shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. The 3.5 years. And now this starts kind of matching up with some stuff that we see in the book of Revelation. So this future aspect of this Roman Empire that is happening in the end times. Now, the 3rd place we see this is in Daniel 9, the very famous 70 weeks vision that talks about the time from when Artaxerxes in 444 BC makes a decree to start rebuilding the city of Jerusalem. From that point, 70 weeks are decreed until the wonderful millennial kingdom comes about. 69 of the weeks, and these weeks are weeks of years, sets of 7 years. So 483 years after Artaxerxes' decree, we have Jesus being crucified. And this Daniel 9 verses 24 through 27 talk about this. But what I want to look at just for our purposes today is verse 26. After the 62 weeks, the 62 plus 7, so we have 69 weeks, 483 years, the Messiah shall be cut off and shall have nothing. And that really is a clear reference to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The king that was to come and usher in the kingdom, he shall be cut off and have nothing. Have nothing? What is that? He has no kingdom that he was supposed to have. Daniel then says, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The prince that shall come is the Antichrist in the future. But when Jesus was cut off in the past, the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. After Jesus was cut off, who destroyed the city and the sanctuary? Well, the Romans did. If the Romans then are the people of the prince who is to come, and that's a reference to the Antichrist, we must have some sort of remnant or version of the Roman Empire in the future. So, much more time and attention these passages deserve than what I can give to you right now. But is there some sort of future Roman Empire in the end days? Yeah, I'm pretty convinced that there is, and that is what will be destroyed along with the rest of the kingdoms of the world for the Messiah's heavenly kingdom to overtake it. Now, okay, what will it look like for a revived Roman Empire? Are we going to have a Caesar, from the city of Rome with a Praetorian Guard and all that? That really is kind of mysterious to us. We don't know exactly how that's going to happen. But in some sense, the Roman Empire never really fully died. In the ancient mindset, you kind of have the Western way of thinking and the Eastern way of thinking. And Rome's way of life and kind of influence over the world was more or less preserved in the Western world. You have European history, then the New World and the United States. The Roman approach and a way of life and kind of hold over the world is more or less preserved in the Western world. And the Greek way of thinking and living is kind of more or less preserved in the Eastern world. It's a very simplistic kind of dichotomy there. But the fumes of the Roman Empire never really fully died. And in fact, if you're a student of European history, there have been many attempts throughout European history, even close to today, to revive that glory of old Rome. France, very specifically, would kind of model itself after, we want to revive Republic. And, there were just these kind of attempts to recapture the glory and essence of what Rome was. So even though we don't see the Roman Empire anymore and we think of it as gone with the Caesars in history, it more or less kind of still is about. So I could see quite easily, in the tribulation years of how that can really be revived more fully, or at least the spirit of the Roman Empire revived more fully, even if not real formally, to have some sort of presence as God sees Rome still around to be fully conquered when Jesus comes back. So who's the Antichrist going to be? Lots of different ideas to that. Lots of different ideas. Everything from an American president to a Jewish man to an Arab or whatever. I do suspect, kind of because of this thrust, that it's going to be some sort of European leader. I don't expect it to be a Jew or an American. God knows. Obviously, we should not play a game of trying to identify individuals, but I do suspect it's going to be some sort of kind of European figure that is in leadership over some sort of revived Roman spirit. Daniel, what do you think about that?
No, you see it all the time in even recent history. Even Mussolini was trying to do, by his own admission, he was trying to revive the Roman Empire,
Yeah.
and France was always trying to revive the old republics, and Germany was doing the same thing. So it's very common, even in the last 100 years, for leaders to try to use that type of language. So it wouldn't surprise me at all for that to be the kind of language and attempt. And in many ways, even the structure of Rome to be the forefront of the end times.
Yeah. And along that too, I think we also need to be careful to not just immediately say, "Oh, it's going to be a pope." That's that's a popular one too,
It is.
because the Vatican is in Rome, and it matches up so perfectly. But there can be a lot of, I think, just anti-Catholic sentiment that just gets too heavily poured in there, and I don't think it's appropriate to really just kind of go there. I don't even presume it's going to be a pope, and I just think it's going to be some sort of European political figure beyond that. But you know what? God is in control. He has the plan worked out, and it's not like the Antichrist is some equal rival to Jesus or anything. He is somebody that God is going to use for His purposes and destroy in good time, and so really, as a believer, we can wonder. We never should worry. I think there's a big difference there. All right, Daniel, what is this month's trivia question?
Well, it's gonna be on food again. I don't know if I'm
Oh,
locked
all
in
right.
on that for some reason or
Let's
not,
do
but,
it.
now fast food, last night, my wife made a tremendous dinner. She tried to imitate a particular fast food sandwich that I like that you can't get here in Alabama. You can
Hmm.
only get it, well, as far as I know, in Texas. Maybe there's other surrounding states, but they don't have it here. You have to go to Dairy Queen to get the Dude. Have you ever had it?
The Dude.
The
I
Dude.
don't think I
It's
have.
like a chicken fried steak sandwich with, like a
Oh, I
cream
have.
gravy sauce.
Yes, I have
Oh,
had that one time because there's a
they're
Dairy Queen here next to Tarleton, and
yes.
and I saw that
Well,
on the menu, and I'm like, I don't remember seeing this in Minnesota.
no, they don't have them other places, but Stacy, my wife, she imitated that beautifully, and I was just in heaven last night, but, that's probably my favorite fast food sandwich. I don't know if you have one or not.
you know, I have throughout time. I used to be a big Burger King. Not like ever been a big Burger King guy, but I used to love their chicken sandwich.
Okay.
It was always the number four. I'm sure the menu's changed now, but it was give me the number
Uh-huh.
four, and it was
For
always
sure.
it was always the chicken sandwich that was elongated. It was kind of more oval shaped. But no, you got the old Chick-fil-A spicy chicken deluxe. I get that all the time, and
Yeah. Do
yeah,
you ever get anything at McDonald's, or is there something at McDonald's that you like?
I used to. Well, I was a big quarter pounder guy. I'm not.
Okay.
I love McDonald's breakfast. I love their breakfast. So egg McMuffin, their bagel sandwiches, stuff like that. But frankly, and this is not a commercial for McDonald's. Clearly, I've kind of gotten sick
No.
of the rest of their food. But I used to just kind of get the quarter pounder with cheese.
Well, it's right across the street from where you teach, and they're
Yes.
everywhere, of course. Well, I wanted to touch on McDonald's. All fast food's really gotten super expensive,
Hmm.
and I think at lunch today, or breakfast this morning, my boys were talking about the restaurant where they work, and you know what? A large drink there costs $4.02. four
Oh,
dollars and two
wow.
cents, Adam. Crazy.
Wow.
Well, you can't. I remember thinking it recently that I could go to McDonald's and get something for like 4 or $5, and it's been so long since I've been there, I realized you can't do that anymore.
Nope. You can't.
And when the bill came, I was like, "What?" Well, if you go to McDonald's and you get a typical, I don't even know what all they sell anymore. I guess it's the standard things from the past. I used to always like the quarter pounder, but I like cheese on mine.
Hmm.
But if you get a quarter pounder with cheese and some fries and a drink, you're probably gonna pay around $11,
Wow.
okay?
Yep.
So, but here's my question, and as you know, Israel does have McDonald's, they have other things too, but the McDonald's are pretty, prevalent, and where I like to hang out in the city center of Jerusalem, they have a regular McDonald's and a kosher McDonald's. You've probably
Hmm.
been to one or both of those. But in Israel, if I pay $11 for a meal here in the United States from McDonald's, in Israel, what will I pay? And I'm gonna give you some
Hmm.
choices. You ready? What's it gonna cost me? Is an $11 meal here gonna cost me 8.70 there? $11 the same? 15.40 or 20.30? Will it cost me 8.70, $11, just like here, 15.40 or 20.30? Think that one over, and I'll have the answer for you later in the podcast. Well, Adam introduced the topic today of the Roman Empire. Last time in our podcast episode, we talked about some stories of martyrdom, and we met Ignatius and Polycarp and others who gave their life in the first and second century. They gave their life for Christ. Roman thugs would charge into cities and homes even, and demand that they give allegiance to the emperor in some very significant periods of history. It was widespread, the persecution. And I guess I can say I enjoyed sharing those with you, even though they were tragic. And it just got
Mm,
me thinking about the Roman Empire and its impact on the Bible as a whole. And so Adam and I decided to pick that topic up today. Rome, of course, is the nation in the biblical history that it conquered the land of Judea. History tells us that it was Pompey the Great who, in 63 BC, came in and conquered the land of Israel. And so, during the time of Jesus, Rome was the master, and the people of Judea, Israel, were the slave. And then in 31 BC, Augustus defeated General Mark Antony. That's a name that we also know from history. And he didn't bring in the Roman uh, nation as a world power at that time. They'd already been a Roman republic for a while, but he began the Roman Empire, and he began to serve as its first emperor. So he began some more autocratic rule during the biblical story. Now, there's a great verse, and you know it, Adam. You could probably even quote it. It's from Galatians 4:4, and it's the classic passage of scripture when we often want to introduce this topic or other similar topics. It says, "But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son,
hmm.
Jesus." So
Yes.
so Jesus could have come at any time, but God's plan was to bring him into the land of Israel, we'll call it that, during the time of the Roman Empire.
Yep.
And so I want to kind of just go back and forth on some things, some ways that Rome has impacted the people of the Bible, and particularly the stories of the Bible that we know so well. But let me kind of quiz you a little bit. I am not expecting you to know all the answers to these questions, Adam. I wouldn't have even known if you quizzed me. And we were talking in show prep about this, and I said, "Well, I'm glad you're such a good sport at this, because if you were to say to me off air, 'Hey, Daniel, can I ask you some trivia questions when we get into the podcast?' I'd have said, 'No, no, I can't do that. I'll freeze up,' but you never do. You do such a great job."
Well,
So let's start with some Roman emperors and their impact on the Bible, and then we'll look at some other things as well, and you can jump in however you like.
okay.
So give me your best shot at this one, and if you don't get it right, don't worry. I wouldn't have either, like I said. But how many Roman emperors do you think, would you say, are specifically named
By
in the
name.
Bible? Yeah, that their name appears in the text of the Bible. How many Roman emperors are specifically named in the Bible?
All right. I think I got this one. I think it's 3. I
Oh,
know
it
it's
is.
I know it's
Wow.
2 for sure.
Awesome.
I'm trying to remember if the third one is by name.
It is 3. It is.
Okay, so well, so you have Augustus is the first one. He kind of was the first formal Roman emperor, right? And
Okay, let me read
so,
the passage. It says, "And it came to pass in those days," Luke 2:1,
yep,
"that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that
Caesar
all the
Augustus.
world should be registered."
Yeah, and that was a common thing to do. You take a census, right? And that
Mhm.
it was a very common thing to do. And so, yeah, all the world should be registered, and to him, all the world is the Roman Empire, of course. All the world that mattered, and so the whole empire should be registered. And so, yeah, everybody had to go back to their hometowns, and that's where you would be counted. And so that was Caesar Augustus.
Okay.
The next one is the second Roman emperor, which was his stepson, actually, not his birth son, but his stepson was Tiberius Caesar.
How in the world do you know this? That is impressive.
Well, because
And
all men should think about the Roman Empire, of course.
by the way, I used to, a few years ago when I was back in Stephenville, I was listening to a podcast. I want to give them some free advertisement here, but there's an Emperors of Rome podcast
Oh,
wherever you get your
great!
podcast, and I used to listen to that all the time.
I
But
need to start
yeah,
listening to that.
Yeah, Luke 3:1. Now in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius
Yep.
Caesar. So there it is.
And
Yep.
Tiberius is fascinating. During his rule, some years before he died, he withdrew from Rome and kind of just basically gave up the administration of the empire to Sejanus, one of his officials. And so Sejanus was somebody that was in league with Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate was one of Sejanus's guys, right? Well, and so he's in good graces with Sejanus and all that, and he's enjoying his, office as prefect. And and I know this because I love teaching through the trial of Jesus before Pilate, and the Jewish leadership there knows that Pilate is very susceptible. So they try a few different lines of attack against Jesus. And one of them that they do is they tell Pilate is trying to get Jesus off because Pilate knows Jesus did not do anything wrong. He is not guilty of what the Jewish leaders are trying to accuse him
Mhm.
of being a seditionist. He's not. Pilate recognizes that. Well, then the Jewish leaders have to say, "Hey, if you let this man go, you are if he claims to be king, there can be
Mhm.
no king but Caesar," which I think is one of the biggest betrayals God's people has ever done against him. But they said, you can't let him go. You are no friend of Caesar." And that would hurt anyway. But Pilate was especially susceptible because his boy Sejanus, by this time, off with his head. He had been killed because Tiberius finally had enough of Sejanus, and from a distance, Tiberius is he's living on an island. I think it's Capri, and but he's still the emperor. So he's like, Sejanus, you got to go. I think that you're trying to take over the empire out from under me, which is probably correct on that. And then so with Sejanus gone, Pilate is in a very tricky, precarious position.
Mhm.
And so when they say you're no friend of Caesar was an official designation of somebody in good graces with Caesar, who is Tiberius. With Sejanus gone, Pilate is susceptible, so he has to kind of be threatened by that. And so Jesus, we could go all day on this too, but Jesus actually has to convince Pilate to go through with it because Jesus is so determined to die
This
for
is
our sins.
exactly what I'm trying to get at, though. The impact of Rome on the story of the Bible, some of it is not just immediately visible to the casual reader,
Right.
but it's significant, isn't
It's
it?
significant. It's going on. It is heavy behind the scenes. It's not only behind the scenes, it is the scene, really, but
Well, some of
but
it's
we don't think of it.
right. Some of it is behind the scenes, and some of it's right out here in the open. So, like you said, we got Augustus who's in the open, and Tiberius is in the open. Who's the third one?
The third one is I'm trying to remember if it names him specifically or not, but
Okay.
it's in Acts where um Priscilla and Aquila come into play because they're chased out of Rome. Because Caesar, I know it's Claudius did
It
this, but I can't remember.
is.
Okay,
Look
it
at
is
that.
Claudius. Does it
It
name him by name then? The
it
text of Acts?
does.
Okay, so
It
Claudius
does.
expelled the Jews from Rome.
Yeah,
And
and in fact, it names him on 2 occasions. So
oh,
I found, like, I don't know, you created or brought up an event there, the significance of Rome's impact even on the trial before Pilate, but here are some of the other ones that I thought of. Now, some of these emperors, again, are named, the 3 that you just were able to so successfully recall, but then others aren't. But let me kind of walk through them, but I'll do them in chronological order. And first of all, the one that we mentioned, it's Augustus who ordered the taxation of the empire, and which required Joseph and Mary to travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem, where Jesus would then be born, and that happened. I don't know what your dating is for the birth of Christ. I would date it to about 5 to 4
yes.
BC.
Yep.
I get that from a great book that has convinced me, chronological aspects of the New Testament, by Harold Honer, one of my
Yep.
former professors at Dallas Seminary, tremendously well researched. So there's that, and then you mentioned Tiberius, who he reigned at the beginning of John the Baptizer's ministry, and then again subsequently during the ministry of the years, and even through the death of Jesus. And I read the 2 passages already where their names are involved in the story. And I'm not sure what your dating is for the years of Christ, but I would date him from 30 to 33 AD.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you mentioned Claudius, and he's mentioned twice. So if I were to ask you what emperor was named more often in the Bible than any other emperor, well, it's
It would be
Claudius,
Claudius, yeah.
because he's twice. He reigned during a great famine in the empire that was mentioned in Acts chapter 11. That would have been approximately
Okay.
47 AD. And then the one you were referring to earlier, he commanded all the Jews to leave Rome. That's also in Acts. That's probably about 3 years later, maybe about 50 AD, and you read about that in Acts 18 too.
Yep.
So those are the first 4 events I thought of that had significant emperor involvement in the story of the Bible. But then there are 3 other significant events that involve an emperor who is not named in the Bible. If you want to take a shot at it, you can, or I can just begin to roll right into them.
Well, okay, so Nero is not named, but the
Okay, good.
Neronian
Right,
persecution, Paul and Peter would have died under that. And when Paul, in Second Timothy, I greet you, even those of Caesar's household. That's Nero.
right. Yep,
I want to
yep. It
appeal to
is.
Caesar. It's Nero. And
Yes,
so,
that's right.
yeah, and
I,
so,
I, I, if you asked most people what emperor did Paul appeal to, they might not say Nero, but then when they finally realize it is Nero, then you kind of go, "Oh, wow, he
yeah,
appealed to Nero."
yep,
Yes, he did.
he did. And th- that weighs in too of when we read in Scripture, honor the emperor.
Yes, honor the
Okay,
king. Yep.
and if as an American, I'm like, I didn't vote for that president. I'm not
Yeah.
honoring that person. That person's
Right.
horrible. Yeah, that person
Right.
ain't Nero. I'm telling you that. And Nero was awful.
Exactly. Who could be that bad?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So let's slow down on
Dial it
how
down.
bad
Yep.
we think we have it.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yep. Okay, and then there's 2 other real significant events that might you would come up with them if I gave you some time, but off the top of your head, they might not just immediately come rushing to you. But
not
one
text
is,
of Scripture. But do you want me to name them, or I don't want to
can
cut
you?
you
You
off?
want to, maybe you'll come up with somebody I didn't include. What do you got?
Are we talking about strictly during the times of the Bible, or am I allowed to go right after?
I'm speaking I was considering like through the end of the apostolic era.
Okay.
Meaning through the death of, like, John in, like,
Okay. Well,
95
then
AD.
it's with an exclamation point. It's Vespasian and Titus, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So, um, in 70 AD, and that's what you were alluding to earlier in your little mini, Titus, who would later become emperor, he was the one who commanded the Roman forces that finally destroyed Jerusalem and the temple that was prophesied in Matthew 24, 1 through 2. Tell our listeners who Vespasian is.
Vespasian was a Roman general who had great success, I think, in Germany and Germanic tribes. But he was one of the Roman generals that he had to become emperor because right after Nero died, there's chaos in the empire, and there's what's known as the Year of the Four Emperors. You
Mhm.
have these other 3 guys that are vying for power, and they get to be emperor for just months at a time, and it's chaos, one right after
Yeah.
another, and they're
It's Galba, Otho, and Vitellius.
Galba, Otho, and Vitellius,
Yeah.
yes. And then but the fourth one is Vespasian. He is conquering Judea. He has to bring it back. It has from a Roman perspective. He's got to bring it back under control because they've rebelled, and so he's sent by Nero initially to go and take care of the place and keep the peace. Right, the Pax Romana. And so Vespasian has to go and take back control. So he's conquering, and you read about this in the Jewish Wars by Josephus. And so Vespasian is sweeping through Judea. Well, then word comes, Nero's dead. Months, go by, and all these people are vying for power. We need somebody that can come in, with some good clout and just restore order back at home. And so Vespasian, who has his son Titus with him in that campaign, leaves to go become emperor and leaves
Right.
Titus back in Judea to finish the job Titus does. He destroys Jerusalem, the temple, and carries the spoils of that war back to Rome. You have Titus's arch that's very famous. That is the stone arch that reliefs are carved into of him of the Romans carrying back the big menorah candelabra back to Rome.
Right. Right.
And after conquering the temple, so then Titus becomes emperor for a couple of years. But Vespasian started the Flavian dynasty, my favorite Roman dynasty, by the way.
Wow. Okay. And then the last significant event that I was thinking does happen near the very end of the apostolic age, and I mentioned John. How does Rome intersect with the life of John, Adam?
Well, um, I don't know specifically if you have something in mind, but
Yeah, this is like guess what Daniel's thinking,
I
right?
guess what he's thinking. There's
Uh,
obviously there's more and more persecution. And my
there,
my the Flavian dynasty is not my favorite because they're good guys that love the Lord. By the way, it's just as a Roman
yeah, gotcha.
perspective, I like the Flavian
Well,
dynasty.
let me see if I can jog your memory. There is a significant event in the life of John that we read about in Revelation chapter 1, verse 9. My Bible's right here. Let me read this to you, and then you're going to be able to say, oh, I know what Daniel's thinking. But verse 9 says, I, John, both your brother and companion in the tribulation and kingdom and patience of Jesus Christ, was on the island that is called Patmos
Yep,
for the word of God and for the testimony of Jesus Christ. And how did he get to Patmos?
he was
Well,
persecuted under Domitian.
he was exiled under Domitian. There's the last significant event. And so these are just seven that I mentioned, and you, of course, emphasize the significance in the life of Pilate. These guys were not. They weren't great guys. You're absolutely
No,
right about that. But I don't know if I would have even wanted to be a Roman emperor. Like like we mentioned Tiberius. Well,
he
he
didn't
was
really want to
smothered.
be it.
Yeah, he did, and at age 79, he got smothered with a pillow while he was on his deathbed because, Caligula couldn't wait, to be emperor, so, "Okay, you're 79, it's time to go.
Yeah,
I'm in."
yeah. The history is mixed there. One of the stories is Tiberius. How did it go? That they thought he was dead. Caligula
Yeah.
and his buddy are like, "All right, yeah, we're the emperor now." And then, but lo and behold, later it's like, "I'm not dead yet." Tiberius, he's back up, and people then are starting to kind of turn back to him. They're like, "Oh
Yeah.
no, he's still here." And then Caligula's like, "Oh, I'll go in and see him and kind of take care of him." And he took care of him, all right. Smothered him with the pillow.
Yeah, and then history says that he was assassinated at age 19. He didn't last long, and then Claudius, I understand, was intentionally poisoned with mushrooms by his wife in AD 64. Nero committed suicide. Galba was assassinated. Otho committed suicide. Vitellius was assassinated. Um, Domitian was assassinated by his own household staff. That's good when your servants
Yeah,
turn against you. You
yeah.
must be a pretty good guy. So these guys were not great guys. And then we read Paul's words: "Honor the king."
Honor the
Oh,
king,
goodness.
because God
Well,
has put human authorities in place. And even if these guys are crazy and they create chaos themselves, human government
right,
generally restricts sin. There must be law and order to some degree, even if the individuals that we're all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. In this is soapbox stuff, but we might think that we're all well and oh, Nero, how could he do that? You get the power and the status and the clout that Nero got. Do we really think that we might operate any differently? But by the grace of God, thankfully, we who are saved, we can have confidence. No, I wouldn't be like Nero, but unsaved Adam, I'm going to be Nero. I'm going to let power go to my head and I'm going to become crazy with it. And am I really any different than Nero?
hmm,
Unsaved? No, I'm not. Really. In my fallenness. I'm just like Nero. And if
Yeah.
I was in his life circumstances, would I really be any different? Probably not. And so God puts people in power, and government generally keeps the peace. Without human government, total anarchy, well, we don't even want to know what that would be like. So, yeah, he uses very flawed people, but God is the one that establishes the emperor or the king and takes him down. And so, when we honor the emperor, as Paul said, we honor what God has put in place. So, there is, in one way, that if we honor the president of the United States, whether I voted for him or not, I'm honoring God. I'm honoring God by honoring those who the structure he has put in place. It doesn't mean that I think the guy might be the best guy in the world or I have some loyalty to him, and my
Mhm.
loyalty is to Christ. But to honor what God has put in place for his good purposes ultimately, that's what Paul meant.
Yes, and there are other passages too that emphasize that. For example, Mark 12, where we read, they bring to Jesus the question about, oh, well, should we be paying our taxes to Caesar? And he presents a coin in front of them and says, "Whose image and inscription is this?" And
Yeah.
they say to him, Caesar's. And then he says the classic line, well, then render under Caesar the things that are Caesar, and under God the things that are God. That's during the time of Tiberius. And
Yep.
um, there's some other passages you mentioned, the how the saints from Philippi, it, in Philippians 4:22, it says all the saints greet you, but especially those of Caesar's household. And that would have been a young Nero. Most people think Nero was an older guy when he eventually took the life of Paul and Peter, but he was either in his late 20s or 30, 31, something like that, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
Most of his reign, he was in his 20s, and he was just sort of out of control. And so Paul is, as we said earlier, when he's appealing to Caesar, he's appealing to probably a 29, 30-year-old Caesar, something along those lines,
Yeah.
maybe younger. And there are other passages that talk about that, but these are the men to whom these passages are referring, and
Yeah.
they weren't exactly pillars of their community, even if they were the Caesar.
Yeah. Other emperors, obviously, and we don't have time to get into this, but we've talked about these guys before. Other emperors that have, great impact on the land of Israel. We have Hadrian,
Yes,
who he
yes.
was awful too. He hated Christians. He hated
Boy, he
Jews. He
did.
hated God. But he had an important reign and important actions that he took that shaped the land of Israel. We have Hadrian, and then of course Constantine much later.
Yes. Yeah, significant impact,
Yeah.
um, world-changing impact
Oh
as
yes.
well.
Yep.
But, Rome installed these, rulers that, they're not emperors, but they still significantly impact the story of the Bible. Like you mentioned, Pilate, he's installed by the Roman leadership, right? He's not a Caesar himself, but as a Roman, he's significantly impacting the story of the execution, the crucifixion of Christ. And there's other guys like Felix and Festus that appear in the Book of Acts. And of course, we could go on and on about the impact that Herod, he wasn't Roman, he was Idumean. He was half Jewish, but yet he was willing to serve as the governor of Judea, and he had friends in high places, and so was put in that position. And all these significant uh, uh, events have men like that associated with them as well. Um, the Romans also, they are behind the very story of Golgotha. Crucifixion
Mm,
is Roman,
yeah.
a Roman choice of execution. They preferred crucifixion because they wanted to come up with the most painful way of executing people as possible, and being hung on a cross sometimes for days at length, 2 or 3 days at length, maybe even longer in some cases. That's a pretty horrible way to go. So they introduced that. um, I've got other examples of ways they impacted the story of the Bible, and if there's some that you might want to jump in on as well. But of course, the way all of Pax Romana and the way they built this golden age of peace, really between the entire period of time that we call the New Testament period, the
Yeah.
first century. It's in a golden age, and so it enabled the roads and the travel, enabling the Apostle Paul to go throughout the empire. That was significant. What are some things anything else that comes to mind for you?
Well, the Pax Romana is huge, and that really is the
Yeah.
fullness of time in God's perfect
Yes.
plan. I- he orchestrates world history. He uses Rome to how he wants them to be used. So if he's going to bring Rome to power to usher in a Pax Romana, so be it. So he brings these guys to power that have good control, administrative control over their whole empire, which stretches over most of the known world at the time, and yeah, you can travel freely. It's like in the United States. If I start in the state of Maine, I can know that I can take a long road trip to California and I'll be just fine. I can stop for gas in any other state and they're all kind of speaking the same language with more or less the same culture. And my bank card will work in any of the states and I don't have to
Yes.
stop at checkpoints. And so that's the Roman Empire. And so the gospel can spread very efficiently in
Yes.
that. And the Bible, the New Testament, is written in Greek. Yeah, it's Greek, it's not Latin, but Greek was the lingua franca of the day, the common language that kind of everybody spoke. It was a shared language, and the Roman Empire that enabled the spread of Greek as the cultural lingua franca to spread, and that's why they wrote the New Testament in Greek, because that's what the common language was. You know, if God wrote the Bible today, like it or not, it would probably be written in English, right? Just because it would be mostly receptive. Many of the people in the world can receive it then. And so you kind of more or less have a Pax Americana. That's a different topic for a different day. In the world today, you had the Pax Romana back there. And yeah, the peace of Rome. Was it peaceful for non-Romans? No, you might be crushed by the Roman Empire, but it was more or less peaceful for a Roman because you could travel anywhere, with reasonable security.
And Adam, you had legal protections, and of course,
Yes.
Roman law is the basis so much of our law system even to today. And
Yep.
Roman citizenship. Paul was a Roman citizen that enabled him to have a tremendous latitude to travel everywhere. And
Yeah. Which is
so,
impressive. You talk about that legal protection for a guy like Paul in the midst of a chaotic event to be able to claim his citizenship, some sort of legal aspect, and it stops the Roman in his tracks. It's like, whoa, the respect that it was an empire of law, and yeah, all of us are law. You always have lawbreakers, but more or less there was a respect for the law, and it brought order. Yeah.
yeah, and on the downside of that, although still impacting, is the fact that the Romans believed in gods. They were
Yes.
not monotheistic like Judaism. But what that did was it created this tremendous persecution, which we talked about last episode, and that's awful. But at the same time, that persecution caused the spread of the gospel throughout the world. And people left Jerusalem because of persecution and began to go out. And so even the conflict of faith was actually an advantage to the spread of the gospel. Let me return to our trivia question very quickly. So, how much do you think that my $11 meal here in America, Adam? How much do you think that costs in Jerusalem?
Well,
8.70, $11, 15.40, or 20.30?
I'm fairly confident I have this. I was going to go with whatever highest number you picked because I got McDonald's in Beersheba. 6 years ago, I got McDonald's in Beersheba, and I paid over $20 for
Did
the
you?
meal. So like my before you gave me the options, I'm thinking somewhere in the low 20s. Some inflation since
Yeah.
then, but I got the big Texan. Boy,
Well,
howdy.
my receipt would have said more along the lines of 15.40, but that, hey, there may be Even in the last couple of years, maybe it's gone up. I don't know.
So was
So probably
1540 the
15 to
answer?
20 bucks is certainly
Okay.
safe to say for sure.
We'll claim that I got it right, even though if
Yes,
1540
yes, yes.
was technically the right answer.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
All right, close us out, Adam.
All right. Well, now you get me hungry for McDonald's,
Yeah.
strangely enough, but even though it's past breakfast time. But we sure do hope that you've enjoyed this episode about the Roman Empire. God causes kingdoms and empires to rise and fall. He appoints rulers and takes them down. No matter how fascinating the powers of men can be, we can always be thankful and excited that our Lord Jesus is the one to come and usher in true righteousness, justice, and peace. Shalom, y'all.
Shalom, y'all.